This is Dateline News and Conversation. We're going to talk about the ICJ ruling against Israel for committing genocide in Palestine. And we're going to talk with our good friend Lisa Savage from Maine about a blog she recently wrote, and it placed a map of Palestine inside the state of Maine. So, Lisa, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Regis. It's nice to see you.
Always good to see you. All right. I'm sure you watched the ICJ judges rule today. I watched it. I was quite moved. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm no legal expert, that's for sure. My thoughts were that Israel was sternly rebuked as being plausibly engaged in genocide. I understand that the process of this particular international court of justice is a long one, and they have to convict all the evidence and all the counter evidence. So they were not going to make a ruling quickly on are they guilty of genocide. However, the provisional rulings that they are in place for the Genocide Convention. In other words, it might take us 2 years to decide, yes, you committed genocide. And meanwhile, people are dying in a genocide. So what can be done about that? South Africa, the nation bringing the action, had asked for several measures to be taken. And in most cases, the court agreed with them. I'm going to read from a list here. I watched it live, but I did not take great notes. So the judges voted 15-2 in favor of the state of Israel shall take all measures to prevent commission of genocide to Gaza. Now, some very leftist people that I follow on social media or read their blogs are very disappointed that the word ceasefire was not used. Others are saying, hey, if it says all measures to prevent the commission of genocide, that includes aerial bombing, sniping, withholding water and fuel, etc. So I guess I'm in the moderate position on that. It seems that that's a pretty good ruling, letting Israel know what you've been doing will not wash and cut it out. 15-2, the state of Israel shall ensure that the military shall not commit any acts of genocide. So that gets a little more specific to stop dropping bombs on people's heads. 16-1, Israel shall take all measures to punish all public solicitations to genocide. And the president of the court took quite a bit of time this morning to read out statements of elected or appointed Israeli government officials inciting genocide. They didn't use any of the TikTok videos that some Israeli military person posts or that kind of anecdotal evidence. They stuck with officials of the state of Israel and quoted quite a few of them making openly genocidal comments about the Palestinians and what they were going to do to them. So I think that's a strong one. Even the lawyer for the state of Israel voted yes on that one. The one abstaining vote for all of these measures was the judge from Uganda. We could speculate about why that might be, but in the case of this about solicitations to genocide, even the Israeli lawyer agreed. Number 4, 16-1, Israel shall take immediate and effective measures to address adverse conditions to life in the Gaza Strip. Again, Uganda was the only no vote. And this would, of course, relate to the fact that people in Gaza are literally starving to death, dying of dehydration, and also, disease is rampant because their entire health infrastructure has been destroyed by aerial bombing. Number 5, Israel shall take effective measures to preserve evidence of actions impacting the Genocide Convention. This was a 15-2 vote. So Israel and Uganda voted against it, but everyone else voted in favor. It's kind of impossible to investigate something if one of the parties keeps destroying the evidence. We've already seen that happen in the case of the October 7th breakout from the concentration camp that is Gaza. where a lot of the evidence was burned. Some of the people who died were burned, their cars and so forth, and Israel was responsible for that. Number 6, Israel shall submit to the court or report all measures taken to follow the orders of the court within 1 month. That was a 15-2 vote. A lot of people took exception to that one, saying, oh, so they can just keep on for a month and then, they're going to investigate themselves and report back. That wasn't how I interpreted what the court said. I interpreted what the court said was cut it out with the genocide, cut it out with the incitements to genocide. It's quite likely this is a genocide, so cut it out with hiding evidence, and get back to us a month and tell us how you did on these things we asked you to either refrain from doing or start doing.
Yeah, that's pretty good analysis. I agree with that, Lisa. But I have a couple of questions to ask you. Do you really think that Israel is going to stop what they're doing right now? What are your thoughts on that?
It might be a lot different if my country wasn't funding and supporting and running interference and protecting their genocide. I know many commentators feel that this ICJ ruling makes it much more difficult for countries in the West, all of whose judges voted, yes, it's, Israel needs to stop doing these genocidal actions. It's going to be a lot harder for people to defend Israel's actions in Gaza and in the West Bank now that the ICJ has ruled it's pretty plausible that this is genocide. Will that stop the Biden administration from shipping war jets and munitions and so forth to Israel? Probably not. Some people have pointed out that attacking Gaza and trying to ethnically cleanse it of Palestinians so that Israeli settlers and outside Zionist settlers can come into Gaza, that part of the strategy here is a direct competition with China's Belt and Road Initiative, a hugely successful, enormous, expensive, years-long infrastructure project that was designed to move goods, including energy goods, but other goods as well, and transport those through nations with a cooperative agreement that lets put the infrastructure in place to do this. Gaza has natural gas fields off its coastline, and there are indications of their interest in building pipelines and other land routes for the transport of goods. Now, as long as there's a state of war, such as we have right now going on, it's doubtful that that will happen, but that seems to be the long game, at least in the minds of some, analysts like Pepe Escobar and people who pay attention to sort of the international big picture rather than getting down into the weeds. So do I think it's likely that Israel's going to stop genociding Gazans and trying to ethnically cleanse Palestinians? No, I don't. They immediately called the ICJ anti-Semitic because somewhere along the lines in the last 100 days, opposing Zionism and its genocidal projects is now anti-Semitic. Since 1948, Zionists have been trying to claim, we speak for all Jews, with many Jews, especially the Orthodox religious Jews, saying, no, you don't. You don't speak for us at all. Zionism is not Judaism, and quit trying to say it is. But as we see, again, in the long game, the whole strategy was, now you can't criticize Israel for killing, what have they killed now? 10,000 Palestinian children in Gaza, and who knows how many are still buried under the rubble. I think we're up to 30,000 total deaths, something along those lines. And then, another 60,000 injured, and then all the people that haven't gotten unburied yet. But it's anti-Semitic for me to say that. They can call me anti-Semitic. I don't care. But a lot of people in the West are very afraid of being tagged with the label anti-Semitic and will bend over backwards to accommodate Zionists' violent actions against innocent people. With the one thing that really disappointed people was right at the outset of the ICJ ruling, there was mention of that Hamas killed 1,200 Israelis on October 7th. Well, as you and I both know, Hamas did not kill 1,200 Israelis. 1,200 Israelis may have died, but the Israeli military killed a lot of those people. The Hannibal Directive, which you never hear mentioned in the mainstream media in the US, they don't even know what the Hannibal Directive is. If you ask someone who only watches, NPR and reads the Washington Post, they have no idea. But the Hannibal Directive is clearly in force, and that is the decision by Israel's official policymakers that you never let your opponents take hostages. After the one Israeli soldier, Gilead Shalit, I think is Shalit, his last name was held for over a year by Hamas and then exchanged for like more than hundreds, I think even more than 1,000 prisoners that Israel had at that time. Israel said, okay, we're not doing that anymore. Don't let them take any hostages. So that in combination with the fact that the Israeli military's communication nodes were taken out immediately when Hamas busted out of Gaza, so that they were flying blind, literally flying blind for quite a bit, and didn't, they were figuring out what to do on their own or talking to someone on the phone, on the ground with a cell phone. They killed a lot of their own military. They killed many, many settlers. They shelled houses in the kibbutz that had Hamas people and Israeli hostages in them. And the fact that the Hannibal Directive is in full force seems obvious if you look at facts on the ground. So that was a disappointing thing that the court said right initially. It sort of goes along with this whole information strategy that the Zionists have used since October 7th, which is the minute you start to say anything about it, they go, do you condemn Hamas? So in other words, the ICJ decided, okay, we'll just condemn Hamas in the first sentence. They never mentioned any of the thousands of prisoners that Israel has, Palestinian prisoners, many of them minors. They aren't even adults, and many of them held in administrative detention, meaning there are no charges, there is no due process, there's no way to defend yourself. You're just locked up until they, decide to let you go. So that was disappointing to some people from again, an information management point of view. But I think the more important thing is now Israel is on tap from 30 days from now to account for why they continued a genocide that the world has been telling them since October 8th. We can't support this. We don't support it. This issue of supporting Israel's genocide on Gaza is the one where Western governments are being revealed, and some actually Arab governments are being revealed for they've lost the consent of the governed. The people they govern do not agree with their policies of supporting Israel at all. We have seen millions of people marching in every continent all over the world, day after day after day. It's hard for me to even keep up with all the notices on social media of all the different marches and blockades and rallies and protests that are going on just in the US right now. Yet the Biden administration appears to be completely deaf to that. I don't think Biden's made a personal appearance in weeks that was not disrupted by pro-Palestinian messages and calls for ceasefire now, and mostly college-age people being dragged out of his, campaign appearance where he wants to talk about why he should be president again. It's a game changer. This is the crack in the facade of, the U.S. empire is mighty. It can bend others to its will. It can tell everyone else what to do. Well, the people aren't having it anymore, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the rest of the population on every continent, as you mentioned, including the Middle East. I was talking to somebody else. It was a poll taken in, I think, Saudi Arabia. 93% of the people are against the government and the government's support for Israel. I think that's probably the case in the United States. I think it's probably the case all across Europe, all of these countries that have just been vassals of the United States and been so intimidated by the anti-Semitic label that they're branded with. Um, but I think, and I wonder how you feel about it, this ruling today was extremely important for the rest of the people of the world. I hope that they will become emboldened to continue the pressure. And when I say pressure, I don't just mean these massive protests, and they are massive, but the boycotting of all things Israel, including the support of the Houthis, who are blocking the transportation through the Red Sea to Israel. This is an economic stranglehold. This is probably the most powerful thing people can do to support the effort. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. I've been engaged in BDS targeting Israel to pressure them on their ethnic cleansing of Palestine ongoing for years now. I know that college students in Maine are organizing to pressure the University of Maine system to divest from doing business with Israeli companies and so forth. I know that the Houthis are like the heroes of this particular juncture in history because they cannot be cowed and cannot be intimidated, and they don't care if they're called anti-Semitic, and they have perfected a way of guarding that very small strait that allows shipping to pass through into the Red Sea and go through the Suez Canal. And they do it with fairly low cost, fairly not super expensive technology. I read something the other day that said, every time the U.S. tries to block one of these Houthi missiles that's going to, hit a ship in the Red Sea, it costs the U.S. like $1 million every time they block one of those, where the Houthis spent like $2,000 on the weapon that they're using. Obviously, they have some support too from richer nations than they are. But just the fact that, I'm a student of history, and I've been saying for a few years now, Regis, saying like, wow, this really looks like World War III to me. It's starting to look that way. When the U.S. decides like, okay, it's time to take on Russia so we can take on China with Russia weakened, and then Russia's just stronger after that attempt. And then Israel goes, whoa, we better finish ethnically cleansing Palestine now because we'll never be stronger than we are today. And then, yes, they've killed a lot of people, but Hamas is in no way been weakened in their ability to mount meaningful military resistance to Israel. As far as I can tell, it looks like Israel's losing militarily. They're certainly losing in the court of world opinion. But when I see maps, Regis, of like the shipping, a data map showing where ships are going now and where, maybe they went 6 months ago, and you see the whole international shipping lane just like shut down, Suez Canal, nothing's going through it, and everything's going all the way down around the Cape of Good Hope at the bottom of Africa and coming back up to get into the Mediterranean on the western end. Again, as a student of history, that is World War level disruption of commerce and trade. I don't know when they're going to start calling it World War III. If you look at the U.S. budget for the Pentagon, and they don't even have nuclear weapons in there, and they don't even have the VA that takes care of the veterans in there. But if you look at just the Pentagon budget, even without all the supplemental funding that they rush to Ukraine or they rush to Israel, we've been on a World War III footing for a long time, since 9/11. I would say, just in terms of where the money's going. The other problem, though, of course, and I think Israel has the same problem, is that the U.S. is very investment intensive in what it produces. We have crony capitalism running the show here. So, a guy comes off the board of Raytheon to be our Secretary of, quote, Defense. That'll tell you what's really happening there. But that is not an effective way to have a responsive self-defense force that can rise to the occasion when a nation is facing an existential threat. We just go off on all these adventures. I think this week the US bombed Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Somalia, and Israel bombed, Gaza with our weapons and our warplanes. So, how long can we keep that up? Not much longer, I don't think. Not much longer.
Yeah, I think the conflict in Ukraine has borne that out. Russia alone has weakened NATO and the United States. On top of that, embarrassed them tremendously. America will never recover from the embarrassment of what's happened in Ukraine. And I'd like to put out, because most people don't see the connection between the conflict in Ukraine and Israel is the United States of America funding both of them. And, I think people are beginning to see that the empire is, well, it has no close. It is losing militarily. It's losing economically. $36 trillion debt in the United States. And that increases by, I don't know, $1 trillion a day or a month, whatever it is. I'm not an economist. But as you mentioned, it's not sustainable. All right, I want to shift gears now. You wrote another very interesting blog that caught my attention, and I want you to talk about it. If Gaza were in Maine, can you explain for me and for our audience what that means? And I'm going to use the graphic that you sent me to support this.
Great. Yeah, one of the beautiful things about the 104-day war on Gaza, one of the silver linings has been that the younger generation has really stepped up to the plate in organizing. And since I've been an anti-war organizer here in little old Maine for a long time, my ability to connect with young people, collaborate with them, support them in their organizing, and be an ally has mushroomed, which in a really good way, and that's been wonderful. So I joined the Maine Coalition for Palestine, which is a newish organization, and we exchange a lot of information in a chat, visuals, events, educational opportunities, that kind of thing. And one of the younger members of the coalition posted this map overlaying if Gaza were in Maine. So the Maine coast and the Gaza eastern border line up pretty well. And obviously Gaza's ocean is on its western border. But for the purposes of this map, it was a good overlay. And then the person put some facts about the comparison between the two things. And the idea behind it is many people in America are just going about their business. Biden told them the economy's good. They don't see any bombs dropping on anybody. When the ICJ case came out, the mainstream press here in the US didn't even cover South Africa's presentation of the case. They only covered Israel's defense the next day. So we're in an information desert here. So this person was trying to bring it home. Like, okay, what if it was a lot closer? And, so made some descriptions about where the South would start in Scarborough, and it would go as far as the Freeport exit on 95. But then the facts of, okay, now take the whole population of Maine, cram them into this little tiny coastal enclave and double it. That's, then cut off all their food, all their water, all their electricity, bomb them from the air, tell them to relocate several times, like, oh, you must go to southern Gaza because northern Gaza will no longer be safe, then bomb them there too. And so I thought it was a really compelling visual, and I reached out to the person and said, hey, is it okay if I share it? And Will said, yes, that's fine. And it's been shared all over the place now, Regis. I'm glad you're doing it with your international audience. It's been shared quite widely nationally because it's a cool comparison that nobody had actually done before. And I added some more support and facts in my blog post where I said, okay, how much money does the Maine taxpayer give to Israel every year, for instance? Or, what would this look like if every hospital in this area of Maine were taken out of commission? I listed the hospitals. That would be Maine Med in Portland. That would be, a whole list of them. Same with universities. Southern Maine is fairly dense with universities. So I named all the, institutions of higher learning that would have been destroyed. Excuse me. And people really found this analogy very useful. It really rang home with them about, sort of how would it be if I was living through this. So I actually never know. When I write a blog post, I'm never really sure whether it's going to resonate with people or not. Honestly, Regis, I write my blog to keep my head from exploding. And if it helps other people too, I'm glad. But my main motivation is just, I can't stand by and watch my country brutalize poor people around the world and in this nation. The southern border is just a travesty at this point too. I got to say something, I have to speak up and say something. And so I'm publishing on 3 platforms at this point. I also have a pretty extensive email list that I email my blog posts out to. And actually, I think Substack has been a really good platform for me in the sense that there's a lot of sharing between different people's Substacks. There's a lot of cross posting that goes on there. Bill Astor, who's on the board of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space with me, has a Substack blog, and he cross-posted that particular If Gaza Were in Maine. So it's gotten a lot of play, and I'm glad that you found it useful too. Maybe other people in other places would like to do something similar where they lay Gaza on top of their country and then examine the suffering and the infrastructure damage. What would that look like where they live?
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. And that's why I wanted to do the show with you. That really brought it home. I haven't been in Maine for now 4 years. And that area between Falmouth and Freeport, that's a very small strip. I mean, it's I don't know how many minutes, but it's less than an hour.
Well, it's not Falmouth and Freeport, it's Scarborough and Freeport.
Scarborough
being just south of Portland.
Right. So how many minutes is that? It's I don't know. It's probably a half an hour.
To Freeport, probably half an hour, I would think.
Yeah. And so when you talk about cramming 2 million people into that tiny area, and Maine's population is only about 1 million. I mean, and then you talk about how much you did mention the state of Maine contributes. How much do they contribute? You listed that in your blog. I don't remember.
Yeah, I'd have to open my blog and tell you. I
think it's over $1 million.
How much money does Maine give to the Israeli military? $11,670,145 per year.
Oh my.
Portland alone, Portland being Maine's biggest city and by far most affluent area in Maine, $1,142,847 per year. Just Maine, just little old Maine.
What could that $1 million Portland gives do for Portland's homeless situation?
Exactly.
I mean, I lived down there. I saw it with my own eyes. I documented much of this. The homeless people.
It's 10 times worse than when you lived here.
Oh,
but it is across the country. It isn't just Portland. I have a TV show with 2 of the Portland city councilors, and we've been doing this for a couple of years now. We're on our 3rd year. And, that's what we talk about every single show. And one of the things that we say is this is not just a Portland problem. The business owners and the rich people in Portland think, why doesn't the city do something? What is this problem? My family live on the West Coast in California. It's a problem in the Bay Area and the San Francisco area. It's a problem in Los Angeles. It's a problem in Bangor, Maine. It's a problem in Lewiston, Maine. It's a problem all over.
Yeah.
Because all we do is make Raytheon richer, and General Dynamics make sure their CEO gets another yacht this year. But some single parent who's struggling to feed their kid and have an address so their child can go to public school, no, we can't help them. We're too busy making rich people richer.
I wanted to comment on a couple of things that you mentioned. You mentioned the number of young people who are caught up now in this anti-Israeli genocide on Palestine. I've been seeing a lot of videos and a lot of photographs, and I have been really surprised at the number of young people. And I think this is going to have enormous importance and influence because, for ever since Vietnam, it's all of us older people who have become what's left of the peace movement. We're either bald or gray haired or getting tired and depressed. But now I hope, and I think you pointed that out, new energy is being infused into what I think is not just a problem of Israel in Palestine. It's a problem with people realizing now, young people, they have no future and their governments don't represent them. You agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of economic pressure on young people. I think it's also, as a retired teacher, a factor of education. The young people that I'm organizing with now that are in college or just out of college, they were educated about the Holocaust. They went through school at a time when there was a lot of literature about the Holocaust. There was a lot of scholarly research. And I saw early on, in late October, I saw a video that a young woman who was a member of Jewish Voices for Peace had made. And she said, I know this is genocide because I studied the Holocaust. I know what ethnic cleansing looks like. I know what the signs are. It doesn't matter to me whether this one's got this national flag or that one's got that national flag. I know what genocide looks like. So that's a factor, the education. Also, those of us with gray hair or no hair at this point, maybe didn't live through the Holocaust, but we were born not long after the Holocaust had happened. And Anne Frank's diary was revelatory in my childhood. The fact that my third grade teacher read us excerpts, that was unusual. People were just finding out. Of course, the US government knew about the Holocaust and the camps, but they kept the US people from knowing that because, hey, they were going to use it to create the state of Israel and weaponize anti-Semitism. So they didn't but the US was turning away refugee ships filled with Jewish refugees fleeing Europe and begging to be let in. The US was like, no, tough luck, go back, die in the camps. And they did. But young people have been educated. There's been enough time for them to know about that. And I'll tell you something else. A friend of one of my older kids is like in his early 40s now. He had a young Jewish friend that visited us maybe 15 years ago or so. And he said, I grew up in a Jewish community in Long Island, and my relatives felt guilty because they didn't move to Israel. So therefore, they could never criticize Israel. That was the price. Their silence was the price of their not immigrating to Israel. And that allowed AIPAC and other such organizations to claim that they spoke for American Jews. By our silence, they got away with that. That was a really interesting perspective that I, not being a Jewish person, was not aware of. I don't think young Jewish people today have any guilt about not immigrating to Israel. They just don't. They see Israel as a violent apartheid state that who would want to live there? And they just are not buying the guilt factor of like, well, why am I guilty for the Holocaust? It's what they always say about the Palestinians. How are the Palestinians culpable for the Holocaust against European Jews in the 1930s and 40s? Like, how are you blaming that on Palestinians? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And, I've been getting reports that I think there's a million, maybe more than a million people, Jews, have fled Israel since all of this started. It's a huge number. The economy is in shambles. It's going to get worse because of the rerouting of shipping, boycotts, the whole bit. The military has proven that they are not the mightiest force on the planet. In fact, Hamas it's like David and Goliath, but Hamas is winning. And I think in terms of the rest of the world, they can see what's happening there. Now, I want to end on this note because you said something that I think is so important. And I love the way you expressed it. Why you write your blog, because you have to or your head would explode. And you're not only doing a blog, but you go to the bridge, literally. You go out and you protest on a weekly basis, at least a weekly basis. And you're involved in a TV show, which you helped create, having discussions with two people from the Portland City Council. Now, what I want to point out is everybody can do something. I'd hate to have people look at you, Lisa, and say, oh, well, that's Lisa. You know, she's really different. You know, she ran for the Senate. You know, I don't have her drive. I don't have her intelligence. They may think you're loaded with money that you could afford to do those kind of things. And you're retired. But the point I want to make is everybody can and must do something to resist. And when I say resist, and I know you have to agree with me, it is not just what is happening in Palestine. It is to resist what is happening globally. And it's an attack not on individual countries. It's an attack on basically our humanity. It's an insidious evil, and I don't hesitate to use the word evil, attack on all of us. And if people can't understand what can happen in Palestine, what can happen in Ukraine, what can happen in the United States, in Somalia, I don't take your pick. If it can happen there, it can happen to you. We've talked a little bit about the economic situation in the United States. It's worse than that. Immigration at the southern border. 25 Republican states are supporting Texas against the United States government, insisting on states' rights supersede the federal government. You could look at the political situation that's going on in the United States, completely divided. It's filled with anger. You know, they attacked Trump, the Orange Man. But how can people tolerate Joseph Biden, who can't find his way off the stage when he finishes, and he can't finish a sentence? I mean, he's completely in advanced stages of dementia.
Well, it's clear that he doesn't decide anything. He is a celebrity spokesman who was hired to explain the decisions of our corporate overlords to us. And it's pretty clear to me that they have selected Trump for next time. Because when you see Trump over and over on the cover of supposedly liberal rags like the New Yorker magazine, that means they've already decided that's who we're getting. But as wags on Twitter are saying, well, if we get Biden, we'll get World War III. And if we get Trump, we'll get Civil War. You know, which do you prefer?
World War III. World War III, you mean?
Oh, did I say World War II? Yeah, World War III. But, you know, the point is, my blog post after the Gaza one was about, they had the New Hampshire primary already. That's a state very like Maine and rather close to Maine. And in that primary, you don't have to be a registered Republican to vote in the Republican primary or vice versa. You can walk in and say, I want to vote in the Democratic primary. Well, 20% of voters wrote something in other than Joe Biden. Joe Biden won the New Hampshire primary with, I think, 51% of write-ins. The DNC didn't even put his name on the ballot because their whole attitude is, we're not holding primaries. We're not holding a nominating process. You got an incumbent? That's good enough. Take him or leave him. But something like 20% of the New Hampshire voters on the Democratic ballot wrote in ceasefire or something else. And then this Israeli, or not Israeli, but an American PAC that promotes Democratic candidates who will do the bidding of the Zionists, wrote a letter to New Hampshire and said, don't you dare vote those, don't you dare count those votes for ceasefire. That is not a person, and it would be illegal to count them, and don't you do that. You know, my point of view, Regis, is when you have to send letters like that, you are losing. You are losing big time.
Yeah. So, Lisa, I can't thank you enough. I want to end on this note. I know you and I respect you. I've known you for a long time. But you're not a class person. You're not somebody that comes from money. You're not somebody that comes from any kind of position of authority. You're a retired school teacher in a rural town in Maine. And yet you have run for the United States Senate. You were involved in all kinds of protest groups, resistant groups. You write a blog. You're working on a TV show for the last couple of years. If you can do that, I know there must be thousands of other people in Maine, the United States, and around the world who can do more than they're doing now, just standing out there with a sign, which is fine, but they can do more. And I want to thank you for the example and the model, the role model that you are and have been for so many for so long. My hats are off to you, Lisa. Thanks for coming on the show.
You know, these are team efforts, and I'm one member of the team, and I feel very privileged to be able to be a member of them.